So the NFL draft has already come and gone, but it's never too early to think about next year. And one Tennessee Volunteer is being talked about as maybe being the number one overall pick in 2025. How realistic is this? And what would this mean for Josh Heupel and the Tennessee football program? That and more coming up today. It's a Friday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Vols. I am Eric Kane. I'm happy to have you guys here along for the ride, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch each and every day. Big shout out to Monopoly Go. You can join your friends and download Monopoly Go today. It is the hit mobile twist on the classic Monopoly. It's free in the App Store and in Google Play. Got a fun show coming up today, talking a lot of NFL draft, but again, when we talk about the NFL draft, it's Tennessee-centric, right? We try to bring it back and say, well, how does this affect Tennessee? What does this mean moving forward? James Pearce being talked about as being the number one overall draft pick in 2025. That in a matter of moments, how that affects Tennessee and more. 2025 NFL volunteers, drafting volunteers. Who outside of James Pearce could hear their name called in 2025, and how it could be more than the three from this past year. That and more coming up in segment 2. And then we're going to jump back to this past year's 2024 NFL draft. Selections by state. Where does Tennessee fall into the category? And what does this mean for in-state recruiting? That and more is your show rundown here for a Friday morning. You can watch us, listen to us, follow us, subscribe to us, and download us all for completely free wherever you get your podcasts, and of course Locked On Vols on the YouTube channel. So we know Pro Football Focus, it's infatuation with James Pearce. We've had Max Chadwick on the show a couple weeks ago, and he talked about kind of leading up to the 2024 NFL Draft, how James Pearce would probably be his first overall defensive player taken, and maybe the number one overall pick, probably not because it's quarterback heavy, but probably his first defensive player taken in this year's draft. And so you look ahead to next year, and Pro Football Focus is, obviously singing the praises of James Pearce once again, coming in at number one on the top 50 big board for NFL draft prospects per Pro Football Focus. Also, James Pearce, the odds are looking, really, really good in his favor. You can check those out on FanDuel Sportsbook, but depending on which book you're looking at, you can get 7-1 odds on James Pearce to be the number one overall draft pick right now. Not bad at all. Some other guys who are kind of in that conversation, Penn State quarterback Drew Aller, Alabama's Jalen Milroe, we know all about him, Travis Hunter of Colorado, the wide receiver defensive back, Mikael Williams, defensive lineman from Georgia, Harold Perkins, a linebacker from LSU, some other guys who are kind of in that conversation. When you look at this big board over there at Pro Football Focus, James Pearce leading the way. You got Mason Graham of Michigan, an interior defensive lineman, is there at number 2 on the big board for Pro Football Focus because he graded out really, really high, this past year, and it was really step and step, stride for stride with Texas's Devontre Sweat, who went in the second round to the Tennessee Titans. 6'3", 318 pounds, and can move. Number 3 on the overall big board is Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU. We've talked about him on this show. Will Johnson from Michigan, so 2 Wolverines there in the top 4. Cornerback Will Johnson there at number 4 from Michigan. Number 5 is Deontay Walker, who we know all about Deion over at Kentucky, defensive lineman. You've got Kelvin Banks, former Tennessee recruit, offensive tackle for Texas, coming there at number 6. I'm not going to read all these, just the top 10. Luther Burden, wide receiver of Missouri, at number 7. Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback from Notre Dame, at number 8. McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, there at number 9. And then there's Travis Hunter, the cornerback, wide receiver, returner, athlete from Colorado at number 10. But again, James Pearce leading the way in Pro Football Focus, and Max Chadwick specifically has had this infatuation with James Pearce for a long time now. This is what he has to say under James Pearce, and I'm looking at the Pro Football Focus way too early top 50 draft prospects for 2025. Quote, Pearce became one of the most fearsome pass rushers in the country last season. The sophomore's 21.3% pressure rate was third among edge defenders in the country, as is 92.4 Pro Football Focus pass rush grade. Pearce ended the season as the 4th most valuable Power 5 edge defender according to Pro Football Focus's wins above average metric. He has freakish explosiveness at 6'5", 242 pounds, and covets speed and power at an elite level. With the 2025 NFL Draft looking like it'll be a weaker quarterback class compared to this past year, with 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12, there's a real chance that Pearce could be number 1 overall in next year's draft. End quote. What would this mean for the University of Tennessee if Pearce were to go number 1? Well, obviously, it's not breaking any news here. Tennessee can use that in recruiting. You have Rodney Garner that can go out there and say, hey, you might want to go get paid NIL, big time bucks somewhere else maybe compared to what you get here. Maybe you want to go and get 50 snaps a game instead of the 35 to 40 if you're a premier player that I would play you here at Tennessee because of my big rotation. But look at that guy that just went number 1 overall in the NFL draft and think about how much money he's making right now. I coached him at Tennessee. So why not? Why would you not want to come here to Tennessee and get some of my brilliance? He wouldn't say that. But, Rodney Garner could use that in recruiting. Tim Banks could use that in recruiting. Of course, Josh Heupel could use that in recruiting. Such a recruiting tool. I used to cover recruiting a lot more than I do now, and I would talk before Tennessee was really was in the process of turning the corner, and they would just kind of say, man, look at the history and how many guys, Tennessee's put out in the NFL draft, and really kind of speaking on the past regimes. And now, as we've talked about in recent weeks, and really since the NFL draft, Josh Heupel's list of players developed who have gotten drafted is getting pretty extensive. And of course, we knew about the 8-9 at this time because Jabari Small actually got an opportunity with the Tennessee Titans. 9 undrafted free agents as well are getting opportunities. But if you could sell coaching up, developing, recruiting, evaluating, all that encompasses a college athlete from start to finish, if you can sell the fact that, hey, I did that, my staff did that, and he's the number 1 overall draft pick, whoo, my goodness, that can go a long way. And also just the talk all season long. Sure, the NFL draft buzz has kind of died down. There's a lot of these early, way too early mock drafts and big boards out there like we're talking about right now. But the NFL draft conversation will start to die down a little bit as we move on in the summer. Why? Well, because it's not until late April, early May that it's going to return for next year. And of course, it's a college football season ahead, and that's what's most important. But we talk so much about Drake May. We talk so much about Caleb Williams. We talked so much about Will Anderson Jr. a couple years ago. We talked so much about Jordan Davis a couple years ago. That conversation was ongoing throughout the summer and on into the football season, obviously. And then, of course, it picked up even more steam throughout the NFL draft process. So my point is, James Pearce is going to be talked about. He's not going to be going away in conversation when you talk about edge rushers and defenders in college football and guys who are getting ready for the NFL draft. And what's next to James Pearce's name? Tennessee. It's a great thing. It's just a continual tool used for recruiting. Tennessee's had several first-round draft picks throughout its history. Most recently, of course, was Darnell Wright, who went 10th overall to the Chicago Bears. A couple of defensive linemen come to mind in 2001, and Albert Haynesworth, and of course, Big John Henderson. Derek Barnett was a first-round draft pick. So many more. Jawan James was the first-round draft pick. Tennessee, Eric Berry. I can go on and on and on. Tennessee's had many, many first-round draft picks throughout the course of the history of the program, but number 1 overall, to my knowledge, well, Peyton went number 1 overall, excuse me, but that hasn't happened outside of Peyton, and that just, it's not a norm, obviously, if you could be the number 1 overall draft pick. So this would be huge. And of course, speculation, long way to go. Pearce has got to go play another season. I get all that. Injuries, it's a contact sport. But this is a great thing for Tennessee. It's a selling point now on the recruiting trail to get more guys to come into your program, develop these guys, and if you have good players, you win more games. And this is kind of where we are in the conversation. So this is awesome. It really is. If you're a Tennessee fan, you're loving this right now. Sure, people can roll their eyes and say, gosh, he hadn't even played a whole season yet. Before, you still got a whole nother season to go before the NFL draft kind of really ramps up. You get in the combine talk and pro days and all that. That's all fine, but the conversation is still there, and a Tennessee player is linked with that. So if I'm Josh Heupel, if I'm Rodney Gardner, if I'm Tim Banks, I'm sitting there patting myself on the back saying, all right, this is good. Got to keep going, but this is really, really good. Intrigued to see what James Pearce's season is going to be. Talking to the Monday night chat earlier this week, and somebody asked what the over-under would be. I mean, if you get the double-digit sacks in this league, it's incredible, in my opinion. That's where, James Pearce finished at the end of last year with 10, I believe. I would set the over-under at 9.5, really. But, 9.5 is a dang good number. It really is. And for that to happen, Tennessee obviously has to have a guy step up on the other side. Is it going to be Tyree West? Is it going to be Tyree Weathersby? Is it going to be Dominic Bailey? Is it going to be Jason Jenkins? The interior pressure needs to be there with Bryson Eason, who might be arguably outside of Pierce the more disruptive, interior defensive lineman out there for Tennessee. Amari Thomas, Omar Norman-Lott. Got to have help, but Tennessee has help. James Pearce has the benefit of playing on the best defensive line and the deepest defensive line in the country. And let's see what he can do. Let's see what he can do come this football season. And hey, maybe he will be Tennessee's number one overall draft pick. That would be awesome. That would just mean a whole lot for Tennessee. Hey, when we come back, we're going to get into more on who could be drafted from Tennessee in 2025. Other names outside of James Pearce. That's coming up next as we continue on with Locked On Vols. I want to tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money is back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into that MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive today with ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Okay, so talking about 2025 NFL draft, but Vols edition. James Pearce, of course, is going to be drafted. How high will he be drafted? We will have to see. Who are some others that will be drafted along with James Pearce? But more than anything, what needs to happen for that to be successful? Well, we went over Josh Heupel's tenure in terms of who got drafted and all that, and how many after each year. Tennessee had, I want to say 6 after 2022. Tennessee had 6 last year, 4 maybe 5. Anyway, my point is, they follow good seasons. 2022 was a great season, and Tennessee's players were rewarded in the NFL draft. The Tennessee football program was rewarded with a lot of draft picks, including a top 10 pick. 2022 was good. 2021, they've had back-to-back years where a lot of guys have been taken. But this past NFL draft year, I don't have it in front of me, and so I'm getting my years confused. My point is, this last NFL draft is coming off an 8-4 regular season. And Tennessee only had 3 players drafted. You see what I'm saying? You go from 11 wins where you have a whole lot to be excited about and guys that are being drafted to 8 regular season wins where you only have 3 players drafted. So the more you win, the more you're noticed, the more tape of yourself is being circulated out there. And when you do well against good competition, when they're evaluating this offensive tackle and you beat him in one of those drills, they're going to say, oh, who is that guy? Who is that guy? Or they're evaluating a quarterback and they see a pick that's thrown. They say, oh yeah, who's that safety? Who's that cornerback? That was a really, really good read. That was a great open field tackle. You put yourself in position and in contention to be in front of many, many evaluators, scouts, personnel, and all that and more, but you got to be a winner. I'm not saying that, guys won't get drafted from bad teams. Look, Jawan Jennings, Trey Smith, Darrell Taylor, all those guys got drafted, Josh Palmer, all those guys got drafted from some mediocre and a really bad football team in points in time. They'll find talent, but it's easier to spot that talent initially when you're a part of a good team and a good thing going. So if Tennessee improves from 8-4 to 10-2 or 11-1 or whatever the case may be, if Tennessee is knocking on the door to representing not the SEC East anymore because that's no more, but going and playing in Atlanta for an SEC championship or knocking on the door for a spot in the 12-team playoff, you're going to be doing yourself some favors. But let's run down the list here. We know about James Pearce, of course. Any quarterbacks Tennessee is going to have drafted next year? No. Nico will not be eligible yet. He'll still have 1 year, and no other quarterback on a roster will. Running backs. I mean, Dylan Sampson will be draft eligible, but I mean, unless he goes off this year, similar to what Jalen Wright did, I don't see him leaving for the NFL draft early at all. So I think running back would be a no as well. Tight end, I mean, technically, well, Ethan Davis will not be eligible, but Holden Stays will be. Have no clue what Holden Stays will be like in this offense. So he's just a rising junior as well. So I would assume no there as well. So no quarterback, no running back, no tight ends in my estimation right now. Wide receivers, interesting. Squirrel will be draft eligible, but much like Zakai Ziegler, I don't think they would be helping themselves at all by leaving school early, even though they have tons and tons of talent. And maybe those two aren't really good examples. Zakai is kind of on a much bigger, different scale because he's really, really good. But I think Squirrel White's really, really good as well. Had a fine season last year, albeit with the issues with the offense. But Squirrel White will be eligible, but I don't think that he'll be gone. It's interesting because Brew McCoy will certainly be eligible for the NFL draft. But this will be off the top of my head, at least his 5th year in college. We know about the issues that he had at USC. We know about he was playing hopscotch, was at USC and then Texas and back at USC and then, of course, at Tennessee. We know he's found stability and he's gotten better and he's refined his skills here at Tennessee. He also suffered a big-time injury, though, to where he missed the last half of the regular season last year, more so, or the last 6 or 7 games of the regular season. So what's the stock look like for a guy like Brew McCoy? He's not the fastest. He's fast enough. He's physical. He runs good routes. I think he catches the ball well. But I'm intrigued to see kind of what his stock would look like, especially if he goes off. If he goes off and has a huge year stat-wise, how does he recover from this injury? But if he goes off and has a huge year stat-wise, kind of what's that stock look like? I'm intrigued. But, of course, Brew McCoy will move on and get an opportunity in the NFL. So he's a guy that could certainly be drafted. Dante Thornton's the other guy. If it clicks and he has a really, really good year stats-wise, he will 100% be drafted. I've been saying it since he got here. Long, explosive, good route runner. Everything they want in a wide receiver at the next level. Everything you want, honestly, in an outside wide receiver in this offense. I understand the intrigue of trying to put him in the slot because the slot just gets so much volume and you want to utilize those skills. But it just didn't pan out for him in the slot in the Tennessee offense. He's got a long way to go. You got to put up stats. You got to show that he can be dependable and counted on this offense. If spring is any indication, then he's well on his way. He was coming around towards the end of last year before his injury. I've mentioned this several times. Dante Thornton is one to keep an eye on because if he's a bust, then sure, he'll be returning, but he's a dude that can go. In fact, when he got to Tennessee last year, he was draft eligible after this last season. They said if he goes off, he'll go. And so, he's probably going to go no matter what this year. And I'll be intrigued to see kind of what his stock looks like if it clicks for him, because again, he could be an early round pick in my opinion. On the offensive line, John Campbell is about to play his 7th college football season. I can't imagine he's going to have a high draft stock. Cooper Mays is interesting. We always like to say, Cooper Mays is little. Cooper Mays is little. Maybe when he stepped foot on campus, he is not all that little anymore. In fact, he's not really that undersized for the center position. But what's the draft stock for an interior offensive lineman who has only played center throughout his college career? Sure, he was a blocking tight end as a true freshman back in 2020. That really doesn't count in my opinion. What's the versatility game to Cooper Mays? We don't know because he's only played center here. I can't imagine it'd be a high draft pick, but Cooper Mays I could see getting drafted from the offensive line. Javonte Spraggins is also interesting. At this time last year in these way too early NFL draft big boards and mock drafts, Javonte Spraggins, after they evaluated Darnell Wright, like I was talking about earlier, they said, oh, who's this guy playing next to him? Who's this guy? Who's this guard? He's feisty. He's fiery. He's strong. Man, I like him. Let's put him in there at 32 on my big board. He got hurt, of course, decided to come back. But what does his draft stock look like? Because he is, I wouldn't say undersized, but he's shorter, not as long, and that's evaluating interior offensive linemen. But he's a guy to pay attention to for sure. And also, just like Brew McCoy, how does he bounce back from injury? We'll have to see. So on the offensive line, I think Cooper Mays and Spraggins are somebody to be paying attention to. Down the line, Lance Hurt for sure where we're talking about for 2025. On the defensive line, we know James Pearce is going to be a guy. Omari Thomas, Omar Norman-Lott, Bryson Eason will certainly be getting looks, but I can't imagine any of those three would be, first couple round draft selections, but all three of those guys could be draft selections. At linebacker, Keenan Peely, kind of like John Campbell, different circumstances because he went to BYU and he went on a 2-year Mormon mission, but Keenan Peely was originally in the class of 2016. He has been here a damn near a decade, pardon my French. He's been here a long time and coming off a huge injury last year. How does he bounce back? What does he look like in a full season of play? He wants an opportunity at the NFL, obviously, but he's an older guy. And so that alone is going to just knock him in the pre-draft analysis and evaluation and stuff. Could he be drafted? Maybe. Undrafted free agent is more likely, in my opinion. Unless he just goes off. So we've seen old guys get drafted before. Hendon Hooker got drafted. It's quarterback, a little bit different. Michael Penix Jr. just got drafted. Again, quarterback, a little bit different. Both those guys were super old. You've got Brandon Sweeten a couple years ago. I say a couple, long time ago. I think he was like 28 when he got drafted. He was drafted in the first round by the Cleveland Browns. That's on them. We'll see about Keenan Peely, but he should be in this conversation. And then defensive back right now, I'm going to say nobody. If Jacoby Thomas goes off, maybe he gets a look. Same with Andre Turrentine, but right now I'd say no. In the future, I think Jamal McCoy and Ricky Gibson are two guys that could get drafted for sure. Boo Carter for sure. But those guys are still early in their career. So I would say outside of James Pearce, I would say look for Brew McCoy, Dante Thornton, Javonte Spraggins, Cooper Mays, Omar Norman-Lott, Amari Thomas, Bryson Eason, James Pearce, of course, in that conversation. It's about 8 guys. And I'm not saying all 8 of those guys will be drafted, but I would kind of go into the season saying, okay, these are the NFL draft prospects who are eligible this year. Kind of keep an eye on them. If Tennessee were to get 5 of those guys drafted, pretty good. If Tennessee were to get 4 of those guys drafted, pretty good. If Tennessee were to get 3 of those guys drafted, kind of a disappointment because it means you probably didn't have a 10-win season or 11-win season or a 9-win season. You're probably average at 8-4 again, and Tennessee's much, much better than that. So the more you win, the more guys you get drafted. It usually works out that way because good players find a way to win games, and NFL talent wants good players. And so NFL draft kind of inspired me to kind of think about a year ahead because of all the James Pearce talk. So let me know what you think. Who do you think is going to be drafted next year from Tennessee? And again, all this reflected back on the recruiting trail. This is how Josh Heupel brings more and more talent to Rocky Top. Would love to know your thoughts at _Caner and at Locked On Vols. Hey, when we come back, we're going to take a look at the 2024 NFL draft selections by state. Where does Tennessee rank, and what does that mean for in-state recruiting? That is coming up next as we continue on with Locked On Vols. All right, guys, I want to tell you about our friends over at Monopoly Go. You gotta take a time out, hit pause. Here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You've already talked about this, but there's just so much stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up on each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome the prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers that you can trade with a friend to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure and other stuff. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multiplayers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover at Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it for free. It's in the Google Play Store and the App Store. Download it for free at Google Play and the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. As we continue on with this NFL draft theme show, again, but how it affects Tennessee, we always bring it back to Tennessee. I found this interesting. Charles Power, who I often reference in the impact analysis when we talk about Tennessee recruits and all that over at VolQuest.com. Charles Powers is the director of recruiting and scouting and rankings and all that and more. He's got an official title, but he does the rankings for recruiting and all that. Over for the On3 Network. He is probably, in my opinion, the best in the business in terms of rankings right now. He's really, really good at his job. It is not an exact science. He's going to miss on every single class. But last time I checked, Joe Lenardi's he doesn't get every one of them in bracketology either. Just fact of the matter. It's an impossible thing to predict. But he hits on more than anybody in the industry, in the recruiting industry, in the side industry, when you compare On3 to 247, to Rivals, and of course ESPN, that really just says they cover recruiting, but they clearly don't. Shannon Terry, who's the owner and founder and all that of On3, and technically my boss, way higher up because I'm just slow man on the totem pole here at VolQuest.com. He quote tweeted Charles Powers, one of his tweets after the NFL draft, essentially saying, hey, On3 hit on this number when comparing, to 247, Rivals, and ESPN in comparison to the NFL draft. He was like, man, it might be time that we take out ESPN and unweight it from the industry, from the weighted industry rankings, because there's so many guys that work so hard at this at On3, at 247, and at Rivals, whereas ESPN just doesn't. And currently how On3 does its industry comparison rankings, 35% are given to both On3 and 247's rankings, 20% to Rivals rankings, and 10% to ESPN. And essentially the industry rankings over at On3, it takes what Rivals ranks a player, what On3 ranks a player, what 247 ranks a player, and what ESPN ranks a player, and they put it all together. But they have those weighted averages saying, okay, well, this is the industry ranking. Here's our ranking of On3, but this is the industry ranking. So you could be a 4-star for On3, maybe a 5-star for On3, but just a 4-star industry because the other services have you down. And ESPN is just so bad at recruiting. It's a shame because they used to be really, really good back when I was little, but it's so bad. And I'm with Shannon Terry. You should just kick ESPN out because it really, really just it's lazy in a lot of areas nowadays. All right, you guys didn't come to listen to me crap all over ESPN, the worldwide leader. So let's move on. Charles Power, 2024 NFL draft picks by home state. And before you ask, when we talk about Florida, who leads the way at 28, the kids from IMG Academy Power took their home states. Didn't say they were just Florida. He took their home states from IMG Academy. Of course, it's a prep school. So Florida still leads the way with 28 draft picks who were taken last weekend in the NFL draft selections. 28 of them call their home Florida. 24 of them come from Texas. 23 of them come from Georgia. 18 from 18 from California. 12 from Louisiana. 10 from Alabama, Maryland, North Carolina, New Jersey, and Ohio. 8 from Arizona, Illinois, and Michigan. 6 from Indiana and Pennsylvania. 5 from Mississippi and New York. 4 from DC, Montana, Nevada, Wisconsin. And I guess that's Canada? Yeah, that's Canada. Okay. So there were 4 from Canada, DC, Montana, Nevada, and Wisconsin. 3 from South Carolina and Tennessee. Only 3 players. I have to do some research on who those 3 players were. But 3 players from Tennessee and South Carolina. 2 from Colorado, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Dakota, Utah, Washington. 1 from Australia, Connecticut, England, Indiana, Kentucky, Kansas, Minnesota, Virginia, West Virginia. And that should be all. If I excluded your state, I'm sorry, it's in here somewhere, but I must have skipped over. It's a lot of information. But point of the matter is, what we've known for a long time, the best athletes come from hotbeds in the state of Florida, in the state of Texas, in Georgia, in California, and in Louisiana. And this backs it up here. always saying, well, Tennessee's in on this guy. Tennessee's in on this guy. Tennessee wants to go in down to Baton Rouge and get Jordan Matthews. LSU passed initially, but LSU wants Jordan Matthews right now. Can Tennessee hold off LSU for Jordan Matthews? That was a conversation a couple cycles ago, right? And we'll see if Jordan Matthews can pan out and step up and be the fourth cornerback this year for the Vols and maybe step on the field and make some plays. We'll see. But Louisiana, hotbed for recruiting. Florida, Texas, California, Georgia. What do these states have different than the others? Texas, big state. California, big state. Georgia, in terms of general population, much smaller than that of Florida, Texas, California. But it's right there in the thick of it. I mean, I played football at Carson Newman. There was a lot of in-state guys, but tons and tons of guys came from the state of Georgia because it is just so good. So Tennessee being ranked all the way down towards the bottom with 3 players. And those 3 players that were drafted from Tennessee, University of Tennessee, were not Tennessee natives. Haddon, Michigan, Joe Milton, Florida, Jalen Wright, of course, North Carolina. A lot of those undrafted free agent guys from the state of Tennessee. So what does this mean about in-state recruiting? Should Tennessee stop recruiting players from the state of Tennessee? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You have to own your state, okay? Obviously, data shows this is just one NFL draft. If you go back and look at the other NFL drafts in recent years, I promise the content's going to what you find is probably going to reflect what you see here for 2024. You have to own your state, and Josh Heupel's done a really, really good job of owning his state, okay? Look at this past cycle, right? Or look at the cycle you're in right now. George McIntyre, got him. Ethan Utley, got him. Rodarius Jackson, got him. Joakim Dotson, got him, okay? In-state guys that you wanted, got them. There's still some guys out there, okay? There's still some guys out there from in-state that you're working on, but you got to keep the top talent in-state. But you can't just take a guy because he's from the volunteer state. And I heard Josh and Swain talking about this earlier in the week, and I think it was Swain that actually said it, and I couldn't agree more. It's like sometimes fans get so mad because Tennessee won't give this guy a look. Oh, it's a local guy. You need to give him a look. He plays a beard in high school. Oh, it's a local guy. He plays in Knox West High School. Got to give him a look. Got to give him a look. What are you doing? Well, okay. If you give him a look, he doesn't pan out. Oh, why'd you waste a scholarship spot there? Come on, guys. I mean, it's just fans are never happy. And that's not just here at Tennessee. That's any fan base across the country, any sport. Fans are never happy a lot of times. Tennessee needs to recruit the best players from the state of Tennessee. But it is not an end-all be-all because you want to be the best program you can possibly be, which means you got to continue to go down and raid Florida and Georgia and Texas and do better in California, do better in Louisiana. Georgia, you're really, really good in. Florida, for the most part, you're pretty good in. You need to be better in California. You need to be better in Texas, to be completely honest with you. This data shows that you can't formulate a recruiting cycle, a recruiting class, solely on in-state guys. Jeremy Pruitt took 10 guys from the state of Tennessee one cycle, and albeit that was the class of 2020, I believe, I can't remember. It was really good. There was a lot of good players in that class, but those cycles don't come along every single year. You have more like you're seeing now and last year, and when that happens, you've got to go get the best of the best. And that's what Tennessee's doing right now with guys like George McIntyre, Ethan Utley, Rodarius Jackson, Joakim Dotson, so on and so forth. There's some others, but so on and so forth. So I thought that was really, really interesting. Always talking about where the best players come from. Again, the states of Florida, Texas, Georgia, California, Louisiana. Tennessee is all the way down with 3 draft selections in 7 rounds of the NFL draft. So in-state recruiting, got to get the best of the best, but you can't just take everybody because they're from the state of Tennessee. I thought that was really, really interesting. Good stuff there from Charles Power and pulling the data. All right, that is going to do it here for this edition of a Friday morning Locked On Vols. Can't thank you enough for being here. Hope you guys enjoy the weekend. You stay safe. We'll come back on Monday. I'm going to be gone out of pocket. I'm currently, if you're watching on YouTube, you see I'm in my home office here. I'm pre-recording this episode, but I'm down in Florida covering Tennessee baseball. I'm going to be down in Longboat Key for a couple of days, coming back on Wednesday, and then I'll be heading over to Nashville to cover Tennessee baseball next weekend in Nashville. So I'll be out of pocket a couple of days, but I will have a show for you each and every day, whether it's pre-recorded 8 days in advance or sitting on the side of the beach drinking a beer. I don't know. Appreciate you guys, as always, for making Locked On Vols your first listen. Can't thank you enough. Really, really do thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you again on a Monday morning. This is Locked On Vols.